Good morning, everyone. Jim LAird joining you live from just outside Grand Pacifica, Nicaragua, a little restaurant out here called Alice's, just outside the main gate of Grand Pacifica. My internet's been kind of sketchy at my house lately, so it seems to be better out here, and they don't open till like noon. And the wind here has been ferocious, so you're probably going to hear some wind noise in the background. You're probably going to hear some like pieces of metal rattling around. This is a metal roof here, so just kind of the price you pay for the sport you play for being in a very remote area. So just doing the best we can. So I was on a call yesterday with a lady who really wanted to get into strength training, and she was reading stuff online and looking at stuff online, and she was very confused, and she didn't really know where to start. She's in her 50s. She needs to start strength training to gain some muscle mass, add some muscle mass. She's having bone density issues, and she's very overwhelmed because a lot of the information on the internet is based on like extreme hypertrophy or extreme strength or extreme aesthetic goals. And if your main goal is just to improve fitness, it's really not that complicated. And to get a little bit stronger and just improve overall health, it's not that complicated. People make it way more complicated than it really is. So I'm going to basically walk you through what I do when I first start working with somebody, particularly someone who's a little older, doesn't really have a lot of experience with strength training. Okay. And so I'm going to look at the overall shape of their body. Okay. Are they a wider person, somebody who's a wider type person, or are they a narrow, slimmer person? A narrow, slimmer person is going to have a tendency to be better at certain things than a wider, blocky person. They're each going to have, their strengths and their weaknesses. I don't really get crazy on everything. To me is an assessment. Okay. So basically I put people through I get them down on the floor and I get them doing different things to kind of just get them moving in different ways. 2, to kind of see what happens. And 3, to build up their overall general physical preparedness. And then I'll do something called an extended warm up, which might be like, I'll do some bird dogs paired with like a modified side plank paired with rocking on their back and forth, depending on, their athletic ability. For somebody who's older, we might not do something that dynamic, but we're generally going to do with something on the floor just to get people moving around and to raise their fitness level up in a reasonable way. Then I'm going to do something I call an extended warm up, which is essentially I like a kettlebell carry or a weighted carry where they just pick a weight up in one hand and they walk and they swing the opposite arm and they just walk maybe 20 yards, switch hands and walk back. Maybe an explosive medicine ball throw into the ground or a chest pass into the wall. I'd call it a rope squat where you hang onto a rope and you squat, essentially, something like that. I will do something like that in a circuit just to get people rolling. When they first start, we might even put some prowler, push some sled in there and so some light sled pushing. And we might go through something like that 3 or 4 times. And that might be the workout at first. Generally speaking, I start most people with a box squat because the reason for that is I want them to learn how to control their pelvis and their rib cage. And I want them to be able to, I want to be able to front load the weight and get them to sit back in their hips. And I want them to learn how to use everything and not arch on everything. So I'll generally have them start with a box squat just to kind of see how they sit and how they stand. And then we're going to do something in a push-up type position. It might be a static bear hold where I'm lining their pelvis and the rib cage up. It might be something like I call a slow motion mountain climber. It might be some crawling on all fours. Then I'm going to do some sort of seated pull down, generally where they're seated on the floor. They're either pulling a rope down. And the reason I want them seated is so that their rib cage and their belly button is in a good position. So their scapula, I can teach their scapula to move on the rib cage. And I'm going to adjust those exercises according to if they're having problems like going overhead. We might start with something different first. I generally like to start with things like walk-ups where you get in a push-up position, walk yourself up to your feet, or some sort of bear crawl variation where you're getting some scapular moving and gliding, and you're working on having that stack. And we're going to modify that. We could, we can have somebody crawl on their elbows and their knees like an army crawl, or we could just have someone hold it statically. It's all going to depend, but I'll generally do something along those lines. And that might be all we do the first, couple weeks, depending on how, what kind of shape they're in. Right. Then generally we're going to have a second day where we do something in half kneeling, which is kind of, I'm going to see that's kind of like a lunge position, but the knees on the ground. I'm going to see, do they crash forward? Do they crash back? Do they crash to the side? Can they sit in half kneeling and maybe, knock the microphone over and do some sort of chopping action in a half kneeling position? How do they row? When they doing some sort of seated cable row or, something, a standing row, I want to see, do they bring their shoulder? Does their shoulder go forward? Something. It might even be with a machine. A lot of times machines are a great way to get people rowing. So we can teach them how to stack the rib cage and the pelvis and teach them how to move that shoulder blade around the rib cage. That's really the most important thing about rows and pull downs, is teaching people how to move that shoulder blade around and up and upwardly rotating. And then we're going to see, if they can do a decent step up. Can they push their whole foot into a box? Are they going to cave in? Are they going to cave out? What's going to happen with that? Can they come up? Can they cross connect out of that? So that, it's nothing extremely fancy or complicated. Generally, the first 4 to 6 weeks of a program is teaching people the actual movements and how I want them to move. And I'm going to pick the right exercise to get them to move in the way I want them to move. But generally speaking, I want people to be able to move their shoulder blades around their rib cage. I want them to be able to go, here and then upwardly rotate. I want people to learn how to shift into each side of their hip, right? And I want people to be able to control the stack. That's basically what I'm looking for in the first 4 to 6 weeks of working with somebody. And then we're going to start, when we start loading people, giving them the right exercises. How much of this needs to be traditional strength training? We're going to incorporate maybe some trap bar deadlift, or very few people I'm going to have deadlift with a straight bar. Generally, it's going to be trap bar. Maybe I deadlift them with kettlebells at first. But we're going to keep things really, really simple and start. And here's the thing. If you haven't strength trained before, you don't really have to start with anything too crazy, right? Anything you do is, I've had plenty of people where we didn't have a weight room. We made some amazing gains with just body weight stuff with people, and then getting people, kids, young kids particularly, to eat a little more food, and made some incredible gains with just body weight programs, right? And that's why when you're a beginner, you don't really need to push and get too fancy too quickly, because you're going to get better. And then, if you want to lift weights, looking at doing something like Jim Windler's 5-3-1 program is a great way to start with that. I would adjust the way some of the exercises are set up, and I would use a safety squat bar instead of a straight bar. I would use a trap bar instead of a regular bar for most people. And then unless you're going to compete in powerlifting, I would not. Most people, I'm not going to do like a standing overhead press. It's going to be more of I would set up like a Viking press or something along those lines. So that's just basically how I would set that up. And it doesn't have to be, obviously if I have somebody who's competing in powerlifting, that's going to be a completely different animal. But most people are not competing in powerlifting. Most people are going to need to be working some sort of balance stuff. Like I call it walk the line, where you're cross connecting and you're walking and you're putting your forearm on your knee. We're going to be putting in some alternate med ball throws, step with one foot, throw, step with the other foot, throw, rotational med ball throws. We're going to incorporate a lot of different athletic things in with people. And we only really need to do, somebody did 5 sets of 5 on a trap bar deadlift paired with maybe some bear crawls, back and forth on that. And then maybe some like a static lunge hold, paired with some pull downs and a side plank. And then after that, you could do some sort of single leg RDL with arm bars or something like that. It doesn't have to be that complicated, right? A lot of people make this stuff really fancy, too complicated. If your goal is just to basically get a little bit stronger, as you can see how crazy the wind is here, just to get stronger and to look good and feel good, it doesn't have to be that complicated. And a lot of people make it way more complicated than it needs to be, because then they want to justify how expensive they are and how much they charge and all that sort of thing. But it's really not that complicated. Even when you get into training high level athletes, a lot of it is just managing intensity, and it's people make it out to be a lot fancier than it needs to be, unfortunately. But it's all about simplicity. So if you are getting started, I would just encourage you to really learn how to control your rib cage and your pelvis. That is going to solve a lot of issues for you. And then I would just start where you are. If you want to look up, go on my YouTube channel. I've got Feel Good Circuits. That'd be a really good place to start. I have some deadlift videos on there on how I approach a deadlift, how I approach the bench press. How there's some videos on my YouTube channel about how I set up for basic, like teaching someone how to do a pull-up, using the squat rack or the Smith machine, sitting in a deep squat, using your legs to help keep, teach the stack. That's really the most important thing, is that you're not using that arching strategy for everything. So make sure you get on our email list. Let's check out and see what the topic is this week. I can't remember. Let me see here. StreamYard. I should have checked beforehand, but let me see here. We're still in April. All right. 15th, 18th, light, sauna, and phototherapy. That's going to be this week's topic. Dr. Stillman and myself. And then let's see, next week is diet, nutrition, and supplements. And I think a lot of it's going to be the mistakes people are making with this stuff. So that's the next 2 weeks' topics. And if you get a chance, go check out Nika Barbell. I got some of my clothes in finally, and I got some of my coffee mugs. They're really cool. Coffee mugs I haven't gotten here, but my clothes have. So yeah, that's a piece of metal on the roof. Might be a solar panel. So it does get a little windy here in the spring. Well, this would be our fall. So we're getting ready to go into our rainy season here. But get on our email list. Go to stillmanwellness.com for that. And hopefully we'll see you on Thursday. I hope you have yourself a great day. And don't forget to get outside and check out nikabarbell.com. Take care.